I thought I knew my husband. After 15 years of marriage, I believed Marcus and I shared everything, 20 dreams, secrets, and most importantly, trust. Our beautiful colonial home in Westchester had been our sanctuary, the place where we'd built our life together, raised our daughter Emma, and created countless memories. The white picket fence, the rose garden I'd tended for over a decade, the kitchen where I'd prepared thousands of meals. Tiffy. It was more than just property to me. It was home. But that Tuesday morning in October changed everything I thought I knew about the man I'd married. Marcus came downstairs earlier than usual, his face wearing that serious expression he reserved for important conversations. He poured himself coffee and sat across from me at our breakfast table, the same spot where we'd shared morning coffee for 15 years. "Sarah," he began, his voice unusually gentle. "We need to talk about our financial situation." I looked up from my laptop where I'd been reviewing Emma's college applications. At 18, our daughter was preparing for her senior year, and the cost of universities had been weighing on both our minds. "What about it?" I asked. Though something in his tone made my stomach tighten, Marcus pulled out a folder thick with documents. "I've been going over our finances with our accountant, and the truth is, we're in deeper trouble than I thought. The market downturn hit my investments hard, and with Emma's college expenses coming up." He paused, running his hand through his graying hair, a gesture I'd come to recognize as his tell when he was stressed. "We need to downsize, Sarah. Significantly." The word hung in the air between us like a weight. Downsize. I'd heard him use that term when talking about his business, but never about our life. "What do you mean, exactly?" I asked, closing my laptop to give him my full attention. "I mean, we need to sell this house, the mortgage, the property taxes, the maintenance. It is bleeding us dry. If we sell now, we can pay off our debts and find something smaller, more manageable." I felt like the floor had shifted beneath me. Sell our house. The house where Emma had taken her first steps, where we'd celebrated every birthday and holiday, where I'd planted every flower in the garden with my own hands. "Marcus, this is our home. Emma's about to graduate. Can't we wait just one more year?" His expression hardened slightly. "Sarah, you don't understand the numbers. We don't have a year, we barely have 6 months before we could be facing foreclosure." The word, foreclosure, hit me like a slap. I'd never imagined we were in that kind of trouble. Marcus had always handled our finances. He was the businessman, the provider, while I'd focused on our home and family. "Why didn't you tell me it was this bad?" "I didn't want to worry you. I kept thinking I could turn things around. But..." He spread the papers in front of me, pointing to numbers that seemed to dance before my eyes. "Look at these projections. If we don't act now, we could lose everything." I stared at the documents, trying to make sense of the financial jargon. Marcus had always been good with money, had built his real estate development company from nothing into a successful business. If he said we were in trouble, then we were in trouble. "How much time do we have?" I asked quietly. "Jennifer Walsh from Premier Properties. She thinks we can get a good price if we list immediately. The market's still strong in our neighborhood." The speed of it all made my head spin. "You've already contacted a realtor, without discussing it with me first." "Sarah, there wasn't time for lengthy discussions. We need to move fast." That night, I lay awake staring at the ceiling of the bedroom Marcus and I had shared for 15 years. The moonlight filtered through the curtains I'd sewn myself when we first moved in, casting familiar shadows on walls that held 15 years of our life together. How had I not seen the signs? How had we gone from comfortable to desperate without me noticing? The next morning, Jennifer Walsh arrived promptly at 10 o'clock. She was everything I expected from a high-end realtor: perfectly styled blonde hair, an expensive suit, and a confidence that filled our living room the moment she entered. "Mrs. Henderson," she said, shaking my hand with a grip that was firm but brief. "Marcus has told me so much about you." Something about the way she said his name, with just a touch too much familiarity, made me study her more closely. But Marcus was already ushering her toward the living room, eager to begin the walkthrough. Jennifer specializes in luxury properties, Marcus explained as we began the tour. She has sold several homes in our price range just this quarter. Jennifer nodded, pulling out her tablet to take notes. The market's been very strong for properties like this: colonial style, established neighborhood, good school district. I think we can list at $850, maybe even $900,000. The number should have been reassuring Faye. We'd paid $420,000 15 years ago, Faye, but instead, it just made the reality of leaving more concrete. As Jennifer measured rooms and took photos, I found myself following behind like a ghost in my own home. She commented professionally on the staging potential of our living room, the dated but functional kitchen that I'd always loved, and the charming master bedroom where Emma had been conceived. The garden is lovely, Jennifer said when we stepped outside. Very well maintained, that adds value. I wanted to tell her about the years I'd spent learning which roses thrived in our soil, about the vegetable garden where Emma had helped me plant tomatoes every spring, about the oak tree Marcus had climbed to hang Emma's swing, but Jennifer was already moving on, calculating square footage and market comparables. I'll have the listing ready by tomorrow, she told Marcus as they shook hands goodbye. We should have showings scheduled by the weekend. After she left, Marcus seemed lighter, more optimistic than he'd been in weeks. See, I told you Jennifer knew what she was doing. If we can get close to 900, we'll be able to pay everything off and still have enough for a nice condo, closer to the city. I nodded, trying to match his enthusiasm, but something felt wrong. Maybe it was the speed of everything, or maybe it was the way Jennifer had looked at our home like it was just another transaction, or maybe it was the way Marcus had seemed so comfortable with her, as if they'd worked together before. When do we tell Emma? I asked. Marcus's expression sobered. Soon, but let's wait until we have an offer. No point in upsetting her unnecessarily. The next 2 weeks passed in a blur of showings. Jennifer scheduled them back to back, sometimes 3 or 4 in a single day. I found myself constantly cleaning, staging, and then leaving my own home so strangers could walk through our private spaces and judge whether our life was worth their investment. Emma noticed the changes immediately. Mom, why are there people constantly coming through our house? And why did you take down all our family photos? I'd hoped to wait until we had an offer, as Marcus suggested, but looking at my daughter's confused face, I realized I couldn't keep lying. Sweetheart, we need to have a talk. I explained the situation as gently as I could. The financial troubles, the need to downsize, the plan to find something smaller but still nice. Emma listened with the kind of mature understanding that made me proud and heartbroken simultaneously. Will I still be able to finish senior year at the same school? Dad and I are looking for places within the district. We'll make sure you can graduate with your friends. But even as I said it, I wondered if that was true. Marcus had been vague about exactly where we'd be moving, just saying we needed to see what options the market provides. 3 weeks into the listing, Jennifer called with news. We have an offer, she announced over speakerphone while Marcus and I sat in his study. $875,000, cash, quick closing. Marcus immediately perked up. That is excellent. When can we close? They want to close in 2 weeks. It is an investor looking for a quick transaction. 2 weeks? I felt panic rise in my chest. That is so fast. We haven't even found a place to move yet. The buyer is offering to rent the house back to you for up to 3 months. Jennifer continued smoothly. That would give you time to find something permanent. Marcus was already nodding. That is perfect, we accept. Wait, I interrupted. Don't I get a say in this? Marcus looked at me with barely concealed impatience. Sarah, this is exactly what we needed. A cash offer, quick close, and time to find our next place. What more could we ask for? What more could we ask for? How about time to process the biggest change in our lives? How about involving me in decisions about my own home? How about considering Emma's feelings? But looking at the relief on Marcus's face, I swallowed my objections. If this was what we needed to do to secure our financial future, then I would have to trust him. The closing was surreal. We sat in a sterile conference room while lawyers pushed papers across a table, reducing 15 years of our life to signatures and bank transfers. I signed where they told me to sign, watched Marcus sign where he was told to sign, and tried not to think about what we were giving up. The buyer never appeared. Jennifer explained that they were an overseas investor working through a management company. Everything was handled through lawyers and electronic transfers. Very common these days, she assured us. International buyers often prefer to handle transactions remotely. When we walked out of the lawyer's office, Marcus was carrying a certified check for more money than I'd ever seen at once. After paying off the mortgage and debts, we still had almost $400,000. See, Marcus said as we drove home to what was now technically our rental house. We're going to be fine, better than fine, we're debt-free with money in the bank. But I didn't feel fine. I felt like we'd sold our souls along with our house. The next month was strange. We were living in our own home but as tenants. Jennifer had mentioned that the new owners planned to renovate so we couldn't make any changes or repairs. It was like living in a museum of our former life. Emma adjusted better than I expected. At least I get to finish senior year here, she said pragmatically. And you guys seem less stressed about money. She was right about Marcus. The financial pressure that had been weighing on him for months seemed to have lifted completely. He was back to his old self, charming, confident, affectionate. We even started talking about taking a vacation, something we hadn't done in years. Where should we go? He asked one evening as we sat in our living room that no longer belonged to us. Europe? We could do that cruise you've always wanted. It was tempting to get caught up in his optimism, but something still nagged at me. Don't you think we should find a permanent place first? This rental arrangement is only for 3 months. We have time, he said, wrapping his arm around me on the couch that would soon belong to someone else. Jennifer's keeping an eye out for properties that might work for us. No rush. But as October turned to November, and November moved toward December, we still hadn't found anything. Marcus claimed Jennifer was having trouble finding properties in our price range within the school district, but he remained oddly unconcerned. Maybe we should look ourselves, I suggested. Broaden our search. No need, Marcus replied. Jennifer knows the market better than we do. Trust the professional. Trust, that word had become complicated for me. I did trust Marcus. He was my husband, the father of my child, my partner for 15 years. But something about this whole situation felt off in a way I couldn't articulate. It started with small things, phone calls that Marcus would take in another room, texts that would make him smile in a way that seemed oddly secretive. Late nights at the office that had returned after months of him being home for dinner every night. Is everything okay with work? I asked one evening when he came home particularly late. Just busy, he said, kissing my cheek, trying to rebuild after the rough patch. I wanted to believe him. I needed to believe him, but doubt had planted itself in my mind like a seed. The breaking point came on a Thursday in late November. Marcus had told me he was meeting with potential investors for his business, and wouldn't be home until late. Emma was at her friend Madison's house working on a project. I was alone in our house that wasn't our house, feeling displaced and restless. I decided to take a walk through our old neighborhood, visiting the places that had been part of our routine for 15 years. The coffee shop where I'd met other moms when Emma was little, the park where we'd spent countless Saturday afternoons, the small downtown area where we'd done our grocery shopping and banking. That is when I saw it. I was walking past Marcello's, the Italian restaurant where Marcus and I had celebrated our anniversary every year, when I glanced through the large front windows. There, at a table in the back corner, sat my husband. He wasn't alone. Across from him, laughing at something he just said, was Jennifer Walsh. But it wasn't a business dinner. Marcus was holding her hand across the table. She was wearing a dress that was far too elegant for a simple real estate consultation, and the way they were looking at each other. I'd been married long enough to recognize intimacy when I saw it. I stood frozen on the sidewalk, feeling like the world had tilted off its axis. My husband, the man who'd convinced me to sell our home, who'd rushed me through major life decisions, who'd been distant and secretive for months, was having what was clearly a romantic dinner with our realtor. How long had this been going on? Was this why he'd been so eager to work with Jennifer specifically? Was this why he'd been so unconcerned about finding us a new permanent home? I backed away from the window before either of them could see me, my mind reeling with questions and implications I didn't want to face. When Marcus came home that night, he acted completely normal. "How was your investor meeting?" I asked, watching his face carefully. "Good," he said without missing a beat. "Very promising. We might have a deal by Christmas." He was lying to me easily, smoothly, without a trace of guilt. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay next to my husband Faye, the man who was apparently cheating on me with the woman who'd sold our house, Faye, and tried to make sense of what I'd seen. Was the affair new? Or had it been going on for months? Had our financial crisis been real? Or had that been a lie too? And most importantly, Faye, what was I going to do about it? Part of me wanted to confront him immediately, to wake him up and demand the truth about Jennifer, about our finances, about everything. But another part of me, a part that was growing stronger by the minute, wanted to be smart about this. If Marcus could lie and scheme, then maybe I needed to do some investigating of my own. The next morning, I waited until Marcus left for work and Emma left for school. Then I did something I'd never done. In 15 years of marriage, Faye, I went through my husband's personal papers. I started with his desk in the study, looking through files and documents for anything that might explain what was really going on. Most of it was standard business paperwork, but in the bottom drawer, I found something interesting. It was a folder labeled Real Estate Investments that I'd never seen before. Inside were documents related to properties Marcus had purchased over the past year, Faye properties I knew nothing about, 3 rental houses, a small apartment building, and a commercial property, all purchased under the name of a company I didn't recognize, MJ Holdings LLC. J. Marcus and Jennifer. My hands shook as I continued reading. According to the documents, MJ Holdings LLC had been actively buying and selling properties for almost 2 years. The company had substantial assets, far more than Marcus had claimed we had when he'd convinced me we needed to sell our house. But the most shocking discovery was at the bottom of the folder. A purchase agreement dated just 2 weeks ago. MJ Holdings LLC had purchased a luxury condo in downtown Manhattan, a penthouse apartment worth over $2 million. I sat back in Marcus's desk chair, the documents scattered in front of me, trying to process what I was seeing. Not only had my husband been lying about our financial situation, but he'd been building a real estate empire with his mistress while convincing me we were on the brink of bankruptcy. The house sale, the rushed timeline, the mysterious overseas buyer who never appeared, Faye, it had all been a setup. Marcus had orchestrated the entire thing to get me to give up my claim to our family home, while he and Jennifer built their new life together. But there was one thing that didn't make sense. According to all the paperwork, I was still Marcus's legal wife. Even if he owned these properties through his LLC, I would still have some claim to marital assets in a divorce, unless... I grabbed my laptop and began searching for information about MJ Holdings LLC. What I found made my stomach drop. The company had been established 18 months ago. Marcus was listed as the managing partner, but according to the state filing he was unmarried. My husband had committed fraud. He'd legally declared himself single while married to me, probably to protect his assets from any future divorce proceedings. And Jennifer was listed as his business partner and co-owner of all properties. They hadn't just been having an affair, they'd been planning to steal my life. I spent the rest of the day in a strange state of numb shock. When Emma came home from school, I somehow managed to act normal, helping her with homework and preparing dinner. When Marcus came home, I listened to him talk about his day and ask about mine, all while knowing he was lying about virtually everything. "Any word from Jennifer about houses for us to look at?" I asked casually as we cleaned up after dinner. "Not yet," Marcus replied without looking at me. "She has been busy with a big commercial deal, but she'll have some options for us soon." More lies. I now knew exactly how busy Jennifer was. She was busy moving into a $2 million penthouse with my husband. That night, I lay awake making plans. I could confront Marcus and demand the truth, but what would that accomplish? He'd already proven he was willing to lie to my face. He'd already stolen our home and hidden assets. If I confronted him now, he'd probably just accelerate whatever timeline he and Jennifer had planned. No. I needed to be smarter than that. I needed proof, legal proof that would hold up in court. and I needed to protect myself and Emma from whatever Marcus and Jennifer had planned next. The next morning, I made an appointment with a lawyer. Not just any lawyer, Faye. I called my college roommate Lisa, who'd become a successful divorce attorney in the city. "Sarah," Lisa exclaimed when I called, "it has been way too long. How are Marcus and Emma?" "Actually, Lisa, I need to ask you something in confidence. If a hypothetical friend discovered that her husband had been hiding assets and possibly committing fraud, what should she do?" There was a pause. "Sarah, are we talking about a hypothetical friend, or are we talking about you?" I broke down and told her everything: the rushed house sale, the mysterious buyer, seeing Marcus with Jennifer, discovering the LLC and hidden properties, everything. Lisa listened without interrupting, occasionally asking for clarification. When I finished, she was quiet for a long moment. "Sarah, if everything you are telling me is true, Marcus has committed several serious crimes. Fraud, perjury, possibly bigamy, if he has tried to marry Jennifer, but more importantly for you, he has stolen marital assets that are rightfully half yours." What should I do? First, document everything. Photograph every paper you found, get copies if you can. Second, we need to figure out what else he is hiding. And third, we need to determine the best way to protect you and Emma legally. I don't want to hurt Emma. She is in her senior year, and she loves her father. I understand, but Sarah, Marcus has already hurt Emma by stealing her college fund, her home, and her family's security. We're not hurting her by exposing this, Faye, we're protecting her future. I met with Lisa the next day. She reviewed all the documents I'd photographed and confirmed my worst fears. "This is bad. Sarah, really bad. Marcus hasn't just hidden assets, Faye, he has stolen them. The LLC was clearly created to move marital property out of your reach, and if he has declared himself unmarried on legal documents while still married to you, that is fraud. So what do? We investigate. I have a private investigator I work with who specializes in tracking hidden assets. We're going to find out exactly what Marcus and Jennifer have been up to, and then, we're going to make sure you get what is legally yours." "How long will that take?" Lisa smiled grimly. "Not as long as you might think. Men like Marcus usually aren't as clever as they think they are. They get arrogant and leave trails." She was right. Within a week, Lisa's private investigator had traced the entire scheme. Marcus and Jennifer had been having an affair for over 2 years. The financial crisis had been completely fabricated. Marcus's business was actually doing very well, generating substantial income that he'd been hiding in the LLC. The overseas buyer of our house had been another shell company controlled by Marcus and Jennifer. They'd essentially bought our family home from themselves, using money Marcus had stolen from our marital assets, then planned to sell it for a huge profit once the divorce was final. The rental arrangement was meant to keep me docile and unsuspecting, while they prepared to spring divorce papers on me. Marcus probably planned to file in January, claiming I'd been an unfit wife and mother, demanding full custody of Emma, and hiding his true assets behind the LLC. But the most infuriating discovery was the timeline. Marcus and Jennifer had purchased the Manhattan penthouse 3 weeks ago, and had already moved in together, while I'd been living in my own home as a confused and displaced tenant. My husband had been playing house with his mistress in a luxury condo, purchased with money stolen from our marriage. "What is our next move?" I asked Lisa. "We're going to give Marcus and Jennifer exactly what they gave you," she replied with a cold smile. A complete surprise. But I had an idea that went beyond just legal revenge. If Marcus could orchestrate an elaborate deception, then so could I. "Lisa, what if we let them think their plan is working? What if we make them feel so confident that they make a mistake? What did you have in mind?" I smiled for the first time in weeks. "I think it is time for Marcus to learn what it feels like to lose everything." Over the next 2 weeks, I played the role of the unsuspecting wife perfectly. I let Marcus continue his lies about investor meetings and delayed house hunting. I acted grateful for Jennifer's hard work on our behalf. I even suggested we consider renting the house for another month since we were having trouble finding the right place. Meanwhile, Lisa and I were busy. We documented every asset, every transaction, every lie. We prepared divorce papers that would freeze all of Marcus's accounts, and demand an immediate accounting of marital property. We gathered evidence of his fraud and perjury, and most importantly, we prepared a surprise that Marcus and Jennifer would never see coming. The plan was elegant in its simplicity. We were going to use Marcus's own scheme against him. Remember the mysterious overseas investor who'd bought our house, the shell company that was actually controlled by Marcus and Jennifer? Well, it turned out that company had a major legal problem. According to Lisa's research, the LLC that had purchased our house had never properly filed its paperwork. The company legally didn't exist, which meant the sale was invalid. Our house had never actually been sold. Marcus and Jennifer thought they owned our family home, but legally, I still owned it, and now I was going to prove it. On a cold December morning, I put my plan into action. I waited until Marcus left for what he told me was an important client meeting, which I now knew was actually his morning routine with Jennifer in their penthouse. Then I called a locksmith. I need all the locks changed on my house, I told him, and I need it done this morning. By noon, our family home had new locks, and I had the only keys. Next, I called the moving company, the same moving company that had helped us pack up our personal items when we'd supposedly sold the house. They were somewhat confused by my instructions, but they followed them exactly. I had them move all of Marcus's belongings out of our house and onto the front lawn. His clothes, his golf clubs, his desk from the study, his precious baseball card collection, everything that belonged to him was now sitting in boxes on our front yard. Then I sat down to wait. Marcus arrived home at 6:30 p.m., just as he had every evening for the past 2 months. But instead of using his key to enter our front door, he found himself standing on the porch, staring at locks that no longer recognized him. I watched through the living room window as confusion crossed his face. He tried his key again, then knocked on the door. "Sarah," he called. "My key isn't working. Are you home?" I opened the door and looked at him through the screen. The way you might look at a stranger who'd come to your door uninvited. "Can I help you?" I asked politely. Marcus stared at me. "Sarah, what is going on? Why isn't my key working?" "Your key doesn't work because you don't live here anymore." "What are you talking about? This is my house." I smiled calmly. "Actually, Marcus, it is not. You sold this house, remember, to an overseas investor through a shell company. Well, it turns out that shell company was never legally established, the sale was invalid. This house was never actually sold." I watched the color drain from his face as he began to understand, "Which means," I continued, "that you've been living in my house for the past 2 months, and now I am asking you to leave." "Sarah, you can't be serious. This is insane. Let me inside so we can talk about this." "I don't think so. You see, I know about Jennifer. I know about the affair, the LLC, the hidden properties, the Manhattan penthouse. I know about everything, Marcus." He tried to bluster. "I don't know what you think you know, but I know you've been stealing from our marriage for 2 years. I know you lied about our financial situation. I know you bought our house from yourself using money you embezzled from our joint accounts. And I know you committed fraud when you declared yourself unmarried on legal documents while still married to me." Marcus's face went through a series of expressions: face shock, denial, anger, and finally, a kind of defeated calculation. "How long have you known?" "Long enough to prepare for this conversation. Your belongings are on the lawn. You have until tomorrow morning to collect them, and then anything left will be donated to charity." "Sarah, please. Let's talk about this rationally. We can work something out. The time for rational discussion was before you decided to steal my life. There is nothing to work out. My lawyer will be in touch about divorce proceedings. You can't keep me from Emma. She is my daughter too." For the first time, my calm facade cracked slightly. "Emma is at Madison's house. She'll be staying there for a few days while you figure out your living arrangements. When she is ready to see you, that is her choice. This is my house too. You can't just lock me out." I pulled out my phone. "Actually, I can. This is my house. You are trespassing. And if you don't leave willingly, I'll call the police." Marcus stared at me for a long moment, as if seeing me for the first time. The submissive, trusting wife he'd manipulated for months was gone, replaced by someone he didn't recognize. "Who are you?" he asked quietly. "I am the woman you underestimated." He turned and walked toward his car, leaving his belongings scattered on the front lawn. as he drove away. I noticed Jennifer's white BMW following behind him. Apparently, she'd been watching from down the street. I went inside my house, Faye, and called Lisa. Phase 1 complete. I reported. How did Phase 2 go? Lisa laughed. Perfectly. As of this morning, all accounts associated with MJ Holdings, LLC are frozen. Marcus and Jennifer are going to have a very unpleasant surprise when they try to access their funds. And the penthouse, since it was purchased with marital assets that Marcus stole, it is now considered marital property. Congratulations, Sarah Faye, you are half owner of a $2 million Manhattan penthouse. The next morning, I received a series of increasingly frantic phone calls from Marcus. He'd apparently spent the night in a hotel and had discovered that his access to the hidden accounts had been cut off. Sarah, you have to stop this madness, he said in his first voicemail. You are going to destroy both of us. By the third voicemail he was begging. Please, let's just talk. We can figure this out together. I didn't return his calls that afternoon. Lisa called with an update. Marcus's lawyer contacted me. They want to negotiate. What did you tell them? I told them we'd be happy to discuss Marcus's criminal liability for fraud, embezzlement, and perjury. Funny how quickly they changed their tune after that. The divorce proceedings that Marcus had probably planned to drag out for months were resolved in 6 weeks. Faced with the evidence of his crimes, he had no choice but to accept my terms. I got the house, half of all the hidden assets, including the Manhattan penthouse, and primary custody of Emma. Marcus got to avoid criminal prosecution, in exchange for giving up any claim to marital property. Jennifer, it turned out, had been planning to leave Marcus anyway once she realized the extent of his legal troubles. Apparently, a man facing potential federal fraud charges wasn't quite as attractive as she'd originally thought. Marcus moved into a small apartment and went back to running his original business, Faye, which, ironically, was actually quite successful. When he wasn't using it to fund elaborate deception schemes, Emma handled the divorce better than I'd expected. She was hurt and angry at her father, but she understood that his choices had consequences. I am proud of you, Mom. She told me one day as we were redecorating her room. You could have just been a victim, but you chose to fight back. As for the house, I kept it, not because of the money, though the property value was substantial, but because it was truly home now. For the first time in months, I could walk through its rooms without feeling like an unwelcome guest. I did make one change though. I had the garden completely redone. The roses that Marcus had always insisted were too much work now bloom more beautifully than ever. And in the center, where there used to be a decorative fountain he'd chosen, I planted an oak tree. It is small now, but someday it will be strong and tall and impossible to uproot. Like me, sometimes I drive past the downtown apartment where Marcus lives now. It is a nice enough place, Faye, a far cry from the penthouse he'd planned to share with Jennifer, but comfortable. He waves if he sees me, and I wave back, not out of affection, but out of something that might be called closure. I learned something important from this experience. Marriage is built on trust, but when that trust is broken, it doesn't mean you have to be broken too. Sometimes the best revenge isn't revenge at all, Faye, it is simply refusing to let someone else's betrayal define your worth. Emma graduated as valedictorian, and is now attending her first choice university Faye paid for. Ironically, with money from the sale of the Manhattan penthouse that Marcus had bought for Jennifer. She wants to study law. She tells me, inspired by watching how legal systems can protect people when they're willing to stand up for themselves. As for me, I am still in our house, still tending my garden, still building a life, but now it is a life I chose, not one that someone else chose for me. And every morning when I wake up in the bedroom that is truly mine, in the house that is truly mine, I remember the most important lesson Marcus taught me: never underestimate a woman who has nothing left to lose, because sometimes, losing everything is just the beginning of finding yourself.